I'm Justin Hunter. I am a co-chair of the Japanese Performing Arts Special Interest Group for the Society for Ethnomusicology. This is our second Zoom talk that we've coordinated for the group, as we typically only meet at the annual meeting for SEM. But we realize that a lot of scholars don't come to that meeting for various reasons, and so we started this, which we hope will be a continued presentation of scholars and performers and folks interested in Japanese performing arts, largely defined. So welcome everyone. I'm going to continue to admit people as we go. Today's talk is being recorded, so if you've got to jump off, or if you know people who wanted to come but they can't, we are working on where we're going to host this talk, as well as the other one by Yuko Oguchi. But we'll work that out. But we will have this posted within a couple of weeks, and we'll make an announcement on the SCM listserv again. But please do, everyone help me welcome Dr. Kiku Day. She is a professional shakuhachi player. She's been playing for 32 years. She earned her PhD in ethnomusicology from SOAS, University London. And but she also has practical training, such as an MFA in performance from Mills College in Oakland, California. She continues to perform and research the shakuhachi, and she's currently a visiting research fellow at Goldsmiths, University, London. So I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to turn it over to her, and I'm going to keep watching to let people in. And just everyone remain muted as Dr. Day does her presentation. At the end, we'll have time for questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Justin. Thank you for the introduction, and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Very exciting. I will just share PowerPoint. I'll do that now. Let me see, share sound, and so here we go. And I'll put that into, right. So I'm going to talk about the shakuhachi. That's basically what I always do. I mean, I play shakuhachi and I research shakuhachi. Some of us are very narrow-minded. So shakuhachi, the Japanese bamboo flute. So the reason for this title of the talk is the very complex and complicated historical background of the shakuhachi. But first of all, I will talk about the body in performance, using the style of Nezasaha Kinpū-ryū as an example of how significant the body in performance can be. After that, I would at the end of the talk like to start a discussion about how to deal with the complexity of the shakuhachi background and how we may deal with this as ethnomusicologists and of course also as practitioners, players of shakuhachi. And right now I'm especially interested struck by, you could say also, how we deal with changes in our common knowledge about this instrument or any instrument musical genre, again as ethnomusicologist practitioners. But first of all, let's go to the main thing. So the shakuhachi is a Japanese notched oblique bamboo flute, and the name, as many of you know, is derived from its length, 1.8, one shaku 8 sun, which is about 54.54 centimeters. This is the standard size. And the photos show jari and jinashi, modern shakuhachi and a modern version of the jinashi shakuhachi. So, but I won't go into that because that's not the purpose of my talk. So, the shakuhachi is also well known for the somewhat vague connection to Zen Buddhism, and also for the begging shakuhachi playing komusō monks during the Edo era. You can see a very early one here on the photo. It's a painting of daily life in Kyoto. That was a specific painting genre during the Edo period and also earlier. So I will in this talk about the body and performance and focus on Kinpū-ryū, the style of shakuhachi playing that comes from the very northern province Aomori, on the largest of the 4 main islands in Japan, the island called Honshu. So you can see it, the point there, the arrow, the red arrow. The Kinpū-ryū comes from not only Aomori prefecture but really Tsugaru-han, so it's very specific where it comes from. And the story of Kinpū-ryū is that in 1816 the samurai Yoshizaki Kodo was sent by his feudal lord in Hirosaki Castle, the 9th Lord Tsugaru Yasuchika, to the temple Ichigatsuji in modern-day Chiba, so nearby Edo, the capital, to formally learn shakuhachi. And Yoshizaki returned, and it is believed that Kinpū-ryū was what came out of that lord ordering his samurai to go and do shakuhachi training. So, a local informant from Hirosaki told me, it is very unique. When Yoshizaki returned to Hirosaki, Hirosaki's high-grade samurais or senior samurais were, by the order of Tsugaru Yasuchika, made to play Kinpū-ryū shakuhachi. So this means that the people who played Kinpū-ryū shakuhachi were limited to not only samurais but also limited to some top ranks of samurai. And it was prohibited to play for other people like farmers or merchants. So it was only played within the territory of the samurai, basically the compounds of the castle that you see there on the photo. I would also like to mention that Kinpū-ryū is considered to be the only shakuhachi group that was secular during the Edo period, because it was taken out of what is still considered the context of the Fuke sect, Buddhist sect that somehow was loosely connected to Buddhism, and where the komusō monks somehow loosely belong to. This may also be something we can address later, because was the shakuhachi religious or Zen Buddhist at all? And that is one of the questions we could try to think about. Anyway, in this paper I'll address the strong connection to place and its natural environment of Kinpū-ryū shakuhachi, and of course to the community there, and not least the battle of komibuki. That is of course my kind of invention to call it the battle of komibuki, which is, but this is strongly related to the body. Komibuki is a technique with a pulsating breath, so there's a constant pulsation in the music. As an insider of the shakuhachi world, both in and outside Japan, and as an ethnomusicologist, I can say that Kinpū-ryū pieces have a very particular connection to place. The pieces are instantly recognizable, which is due to this komibuki, the very characteristic technique only found in Kinpū-ryū. It's almost possible to say that the narrative of Kinpū-ryū can almost be boiled down to this battle of komibuki. Who does it right? And which part of the body do you do it with? And the question, of course, is who owns the music and what is right and what is wrong? I don't think I can answer all these questions with like simple answers, but let's look through it. I will now play for you a video with Yamada Fumio, who was one of the 4 designated intangible cultural assets holders of Kinpū-ryū there are today. The title is on prefectural level, not on state level. So you see Yamada here. Okay, so I will just demonstrate it myself, what he did. I don't know how well you could hear the sound. It's not very loud on this video. So basically what Yamada does is that he uses the hara, so below the muscles below your navel, and he pushes up the diaphragm. And this was about the tempo that he used. If you train this, you can actually train so that you can do it fast and finer. So this is how he does it. And as a place, Tsugaru or Hirosaki, the town of Hirosaki, is produced through the playing of komibuki in this music. But how is it defined, represented, and transformed? And who owns the music? We're somehow moving into what I call the realm of the battle of the komibuki. But before I go into komibuki itself, let me explain a bit of the background for Kinpū-ryū and the connection to place and how it was disseminated to other parts of Japan. One of the major changes that happened in the history of Kinpū-ryū, being this even more elitist occupation than the Fuke Shakuhachi in some ways, because there was only so few people who played it. That was the person that came as the person Jinnyodo. Jinnyodo was born in the Meiji period, 1891. Thus, 20 years after the abolition of Fuke sect in 1871. Jin's father had been a samurai of the Tsugaru Han, and Jin learned from several master players who, according to his narrative, had all been samurai in the past. Jinnyodo moved to Tokyo when he was 19 years old, learned various other shakuhachi styles from many teachers, collected 150 pieces into his repertoire, and had many students. And Jinnyodo was very influential in disseminating Nezasaha Kinpū-ryū shakuhachi style and pieces to Tokyo and to the rest of the country. Today, most major lineages of schools of shakuhachi will have Kinpū-ryū pieces included in their repertoire. The narration of how music is connected to the land of Tsugaru is repeated both by the locals and the non-locals. Regional characteristics such as climate are drawn upon, and notions of the characters of the people in the region is mentioned as well. As Dr. Yamada told me when discussing the various ways Kinpū-ryū is played, he said, "What we play here is a very local playing style, and it's an old playing style. Thus, my job is to play, keep, and transmit the old style the way it has been." The attitude is that there's a difference between what they do down there in Tokyo and how Kinpū-ryū is played in Hirosaki. And I suppose that the aim of designating 4 intangible culture holders of Kinpū-ryū on a prefectural level in Aomori Prefecture is, among other reasons, also to establish a notion of the Kinpū-ryū of Hirosaki, the way that it is played in the land where it developed. An intangible cultural property is the Japanese government's law for the protection of cultural properties from 1950. It includes art forms that it describes as high historical artistic values such as drama, music, and craft techniques. There's both on national level and on local level, such as in the case of Kinpū-ryū, which is on prefectural level of Aomori. And you can see the 4 listed here. Aomori Prefecture have published a book together with a DVD, and it's the Aomori Prefecture's Department of Culture that's done that. And it clearly shows Aomori Prefecture claiming the originality of Kinpū-ryū by officially making DVDs where the 4 tradition holders play, so the way of doing komibuki can be heard. They also include notation, thereby claiming the original notation system for Kinpū-ryū, in contrast to other guilds' notation of Kinpū-ryū pieces, because in Shakuhachi notation, as in many other Japanese art forms, every school has its own variation of notation. So of course it will be notated within the school system. A chart showing the lineage of Kinpū-ryū players furthermore cements the real player's genealogy. And the notion of genealogy and the right way of playing is nothing specific to Kinpū-ryū, of course. And as John Connell and Chris Gibson puts it in the soundtracks, popular music identity in place, they say that idea of specially fixed continuity is valued over change, and music linked to particular places can be linked as expression of traditions and genuine aspects of local culture. So it's an important thing. Those are just pictures of the 4 tradition holders at present. It is clear that by connecting and embedding the Kinpū-ryū pieces to Hirosaki, a sense of authenticity is constructed for the right way also of playing komibuki. As some players claim, Kinpū-ryū ought to be played in Tsugaru Ben, so the local dialect of Tsugaru. And Tsugaru Ben is very particular, so. However, of course, as I mentioned before, Kinpū-ryū is played by many people, not only Kinpū-ryū players as such. So let's hear Zenyoji Kesuke, who's regarded as one of the absolute top players today. He's absolutely a sublime player. He's from Tokyo, and he is a magodeshi, which means grandchild students of Jin-Yodo, so student of a student of Jin-Yodo. So, but it seems like he also have met him, Jin-Yodo. I will try to. No, that didn't work. All right. So again, this piece, Joshi, is instantly recognizable to be a Kinpū-ryū piece due to the komibuki. And again, it's instantly recognizable that this is music that came from Hirosaki, Tsugaru. So it connects immediately to the place. And this connection is produced through musical practice by employing this technique. But Zenyoji plays it very differently. If I should try to imitate what he did, it's much more up here. Something like that. It's not my strong point here. But here you see 2 of the opposites. There are many, many variations. One of the local informant told me that the komibuki technique and the music are born here by people who lived a lifestyle in the snowy, cold area with windy nights and everything. These are the roots that created the technique in the first place. When you're divorced from them, all these kind of environmental things, it changes. So it really connects to the climate, the land, the landscape, and the people as well. Oops. I wonder Oh, here it is. Okay, so it's interesting. I can't really actually see the whole thing myself. I was planning to read from the the slide. So somebody is playing from Kyoto is saying, I'm just trying to imitate the dialect, never become a native speaker. I'm trying to do what I can, think, about it, and I'm trying to play as the imagination of the place. And professional shakuhachi players from Tokyo who have Kinpū-ryū pieces in their repertoire, this is taken from various people that I've kept anonymous. If you look from the viewpoint of other areas, then Tsugaru-han is insolent. They are so noisy that we don't want to keep company with such people. They're rebuking each other. They're quite fierce, furious, and violent in Tsugaru. You only have to go a little south to Nambuhan, and there they are much more mellow. If you go north towards Shimokita Peninsula, it begins to be more elegant, lively but restrained. Or somebody else says, it's only in Hirosaki that it's like this. It's a really rare case. The people there are obstinate and headstrong. I do feel it is only people in Hirosaki that possesses this unique passion or rage. That's my impression. The teacher from whom I learned Kinpū-ryū, his teacher was Jin Yodo. When Jin was young, people gathered around him and played Kinpū-ryū. The stories I've heard from the conversations they had, he would point at them yelling such a superficial, half-hearted way of playing komibuki. So it's very much about komibuki. I have the image that people in Hirosaki are burning hot, and Hirosaki seems to be a place with violent weather which influences the characters of the people living there. So there's quite some strong opinions about the people of Hirosaki and its natural environment as well. So if we're looking at Kinpū-ryū as a Shakuhachi subculture and using theories of subculture, I almost want to say it's a slight stigmatization surrounding the people and the culture of Tsugaru-han, and especially Hirosaki. But the music is very loved at the same time, as long as we use other body parts to produce it. What makes Kinpū-ryū special? Of course, there are many opinions about this, and I'm not saying that this is how everybody talks about it, but this is really something that I do encounter in Japan a lot. As defined by the French sociologist and anthropologist Marcel Mauss, body techniques are uses of the body which vary across societies, subpopulations within societies, such as status groups and historical periods as well. If we understand music as a collective activity, the act of learning body technique is to acquire a new way of knowing, understanding, and relating to the world, and perhaps even also to oneself. And it's exactly here that complexities and disagreements arouse. So first, how is komibuki created? In other words, how is the body used to create komibuki? And that becomes an important issue. Most players today admit that nobody can explain why or how this technique started, although the repeated myth is that the Kinpū-ryū players used this technique in order to stay warm during the harsh Hirosaki winters. One local informant told me, philosophically, most players would have been samurai, so they would have been doing sword training or the like together with playing the shakuhachi. One possibility is that komibuki was activated by energy coursing through you. They were already using hara, the lower stomach area, to centrate the samurai training. So it was a kind of a natural progression towards the breathing technique hara. Gives an accurate, attentive awareness. So, maybe did I go too long? Here. Yeah, so when asked Zen Kesuke where, how he makes komibuki, he said that he was using the throat to cut the air, and simultaneously kind of stress with the breath, and of course more pressure with the diaphragm. And then he also said that they say, which is the people in Hirosaki, that you should use your stomach to cut the sound. However, if you do like that with your stomach, and then he said peko peko, peko peko, which is kind of a derogative way of expressing this. It's an onomatopoeia, and in this context it's like something is flapping, or you can't do it the speed required. So in reality you cut with the throat, but you have to augment the pressure with the diaphragm and thereby get an effect like compression, and this will transmit it to your stomach, and then gang gang gang. So that's another onomatopoeia, and I suppose gang 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 is kind of, it's got a stronger image. This is why you can get this image of cutting with your stomach, but if you use your stomach to do ha ha ha, it would not sound the way it should. Well, Yamada Fumio, he said, when I listen to people from Jinyodo style or from Tokyo play Kinpū-ryū, then the part where I really feel this is not right is the komibuki. Komi has to be played, so each of them are cut, bishi, bishi, so it's almost like a rod hitting or something like that, But they play like yuri, so vibrato. This is not at all komi. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I feel the difference. One should not cut it with the mouth or throat. As much as possible, one should use abdominal muscles. It should come from the bottom of your stomach as hu, 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 blowing fuki, tsugaru, which means hit with the breath. So there's all these different opinions. So Kurahashi Yodo is he's a famous shakuhachi player from Kyoto. He said, I suppose that komibuki is, after all, the culture of Tsugaru. Perhaps it's a local dialect of Tsugaru, but I speak Kyoto dialect, so I'm not a genuine or real thing when playing Kinpū-ryū. I have to admit that I've never been to Tsugaru. That means I do not know what Tsugaru as a place is in reality. So I'm only in the world of imagination. I am with the shakuhachi expressing my imagination of Tsugaru. So still, even though that he doesn't have personally a contact with Tsugaru, he's still connecting it very strongly with that place, which is, I think, quite remarkable for Kinpū-ryū. Also, even within shakuhachi repertoire, there's a few other repertoires that has that connection as well. But since I'm not a person from Tsugaru, it will also be wrong to try to imitate the sound of the people there. So I admire the culture of Tsugaru, but without imitating it. I want to play my own music. So in regard to komibuki, I want to use my own komibuki. So despite the fierce stance that some players take regarding the right way to play komi, the players from urban areas such as Tokyo and Kyoto admit that they are not native speakers of komibuki or Tsugaru-ben. Here I would like to just note how the imagination or collective memory of place also provide a basis for reflecting on the importance of physical space, the Tohoku region, after all, the space of imagination. Benedict Anderson's well-known argument has it that communities are to be distinguished not by their falsity or genuineness, but in the style that they imagined. So in the imagination, the character of Tsugaru people is complex, located remote from the center, at least when viewed from the major cities of Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto. It can be imagined both negatively and positively. There are many reasons why Aomori Prefecture might want to standardize a local sound of Kinpū-ryū, but I cannot here avoid first considering the ambiguous status that this area has among people living elsewhere in Japan. The region is often often called Uranihon, rear Japan, or the back side of Japan. And the region has been generally viewed as the region as backward, and people are hard, non-cultured people. However, it's at the same time also the place of urban Japanese imagination of a simpler life, genuine Japanese life, in which the connection between people had an importance, and where you live closer to nature, which is reinforced by the concept of furusato. So this furusato means literally old village, but it means like hometown, a once native place. So it's quite complex in the sense that Kinpū-ryū was on the verge of extinction, but basically, at least in Hirosaki, but because other people in other parts of Japan is playing Kinpū-ryū, Kinpū-ryū is gonna survive. It's going strong, but locally they're actually really struggling right now. Yes, I think I'm gonna skip a few things and maybe go over to the next subject that I would really like to touch upon. The connection is, for example, that Yamada Fumio's one of his theories about the post-Edo period kind of popularity of Kinpū-ryū, how it's actually gone up and down. He connects this to religion, to Zen Buddhism, because Kinpū-ryū was regarded as the only secular style of Shakuhachi during the Edo period, which can again be discussed, but I'm just gonna run over that. But when it changed into Meiji period, and there was this hunt down of Buddhists, and the komusō monks were not particularly well seen in Japanese society at the time, it seems like Kinpū-ryū thrived because it was free of that. It was a samurai tradition. But now, today, Kinpū-ryū is suffering because it doesn't have this strong liaison with Zen Buddhism. So that is his theory that I found fascinating. Especially when we consider the dynamics of how we as Shakuhachi players and ethnomusicologists understand the Shakuhachi history. And I'm an ethnomusicologist with a strong emphasis on ethnologist. So I mostly do research on people who are live and who play live music. So history is not my strong point, so I try to stay out of it, but I can't completely stay out of it. So what I would like to also make a point of discussion is how do we ethnomusicologists talk about a viewpoint or knowledge about a musical tradition that is changing, in case of Shakuhachi, of course. So there's no doubt that there is a change. There have been a change over time. You know, the emphasis on the religion or the meditation, maybe even. And right now in Shakuhachi scholarships, it's changed in a way so that it's almost like the Shakuhachi has never had any connection with Zen Buddhism. And there's no doubt that there is an import of religious view or gaze of Japan and the Japanese art from the West. And the Shakuhachi is part of that as well. A romanticized idea of Ronin being a free spirit, yet a religious and righteous person may be very far-fetched from reality. So I was struck by reviewers of one of my latest articles in Ethnomusicology Forum. This was an article on performance research in a special issue on performance research. So it's not an article on the history of Shakuhachi. However, all the reviewers commenting on was the facts or non-facts of the komusō and the Fuke sects. And I was really struck by that. And because I wrote so short a introduction to the Shakuhachi, so very simplistic, very short, and I wrote that it's regarded today that Shakuhachi was a tool of meditation for the komusō monks. I didn't say it was a fact, but of course that really changed a few things. So now of course I can't see this again. So one of the things that the reviewers wrote was the author does not mention that not all the monks of the Fuke sect were real monks. A large number of them were ronin and were crooks and gangsters disguising themselves as monks. So of course that is part of what is said about the Shakuhachi history, but it's also a little bit too much maybe. I find really, how do we know they were crooks and gangsters, and a large number of them? And I'm also want to be a little bit critical to the whole ronin thing. How can we, during the Edo period, which is 265 years I think, how can we retain, have ronin all the time through? Ronin is not a title that you inherit. And so there is also something that we forget here. Another thing I was told, and a point that the author does not raise, and which I think is crucial to know in understanding of the meditative aspect of the flute, and its music, is that historical in Japan it is an invented tradition, and that the view that Shakuhachi music can be used for meditation is also modern invented tradition from the West. So I can see this point about meditation, what is that and how much meditation do you actually do and these kind of things. But however, the whole idea of a notion that it's just imported from the West, it's something big to take on, I believe. And so if you look at these paintings from the Edo period where Shakuhachi players are dressed in robes, Buddhist robes, so I suppose that all this should have been fakes. So all the komusō temples that were around, they were all fake. How do we my question here is, how do we ethnomusicology just talk about these changes of knowledge? So okay, it's for sure something that I think most of us, and most of the ethnomusicologists dealing with Shakuhachi, I think, also play themselves. And I believe most of us, if not all of us, have gone through a process where we've been told by our teachers that the Shakuhachi history is connected to Zen Buddhism. And then in the academic kind of work we do, of course, we start unpacking this, and it's much more complex than that. So how should ethnomusicologists talk about when knowledge changes in the field? How do we deal with right and wrong? And I hope you understand. I think basically my time is more or less out for speaking, and I hope that maybe this could we could start up a discussion. Of course, you can also ask into my presentation on the komibuki and the Kinpū-ryū as well. But so I guess there are many of you out there who are either ethnomusicologist or Shakuhachi players, and it would be really good, I think, to discuss, how do we deal with these changes, and how do we then speak to each other as well, in the case these knowledge changes. Okay, so with a picture from Hirosaki, I would like to stop there. Share.
Yeah, so I'll thank you very much, Kiku. That was really great. I loved it. I'll open it up to questions from everybody in who's still here. But first, let's just all thank her. Clap emojis or unmute and clap something, because that was wonderful. Thank you very much. But yeah, I'll open up for questions. I'll mute myself again. I do have one question. It's very minor, but I'm going to wait a while before I ask it. Yeah. Just if you want to, if Susan, go ahead. If you want to ask a question, just raise your hand with the tools there. But Susan, I saw your hand up, so please.
Oh, you're still muted.
Susan, you're muted.
Okay, I found it.
There you are.
There you are.
Yeah, there. Thank you. That was a very interesting talk. I did want a little more detail about what you mean that playing Kinpū-ryū in Tsugaru Ben. And what does that mean? Does that mean following the nuances of the dialect? What does that mean?
I don't think it's particular nuances like of speech as such. It's not my own phrase. It's actually something that they say very often, both in Tsugaru and or Hirosaki and other places as well. I think it really expresses the complexity of how to play this komibuki that is so important for the style, and yet we can't really agree on it. So I think it's one way of saying, that we should try to play as the locals do as much as possible. I think that is kind of the aim of that phrase. Although you also saw in my presentation that many people think something else, obviously. But yes, so I think that is the aim.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Timothy Olson has his hand up.
Hi, I'm a colleague of Jennifer Matsui at Union College, and a bunch of my students are in this place as well. And I wanted to just ask, because the presenter was hiding behind shared screen for a lot of the talk, if you could sort of just maybe play for us and physically illustrate some of the techniques and whatnot that were the focus of this, that would be great.
Oh, like, yeah. I could. So let me just push the computer a little bit away. And so what Yamada who's a designated holder of Kinpū-ryū, what he was talking about, that you have to do all the movements down here below your navel. So it's like this. I'm just going to do it on one note. So you use your abdominal muscles to push the diaphragm up to give that pulsating sound. And as I said, if you really practice that a lot, you do get quite good at it, and you can do it faster. But of course, it does sound different. And I don't think right now that my komibuki with the hara sounds like bishi, bishi, as Yamada-san was saying. Not to that point, as if you remember his did. So that's one of them. Then there's a bunch of other ways of doing this. And so Zen Yoshikesuke said that he would cut with somewhere in the back of his throat, nearby the vocal cords. And you can also see it. He does also do a little movement. So something like... And here I don't move this at all, except for maybe putting a little bit more pressure on the air stream. And I've seen many others. I mean, there are people who basically do it with head movements as well. So that's one way. And you can also, of course, do it with chest vibrato or chest. So those are the various different types, and part of the battle, because the Hirosaki people really insist that it should come from here, while the others say, oh, you can't, it doesn't sound good, it doesn't sound as it should, which is interesting too. I'm working a little bit on a theory. I don't know if maybe it's too far out, or maybe I'll drop it. So does it mean anything? So where on the body it's placed? Is it too far down, basically, on your body for people today to be doing this? Does it feel more safe to do it up here? But I don't know if I will ever be able to get an answer on that. I'll have to work with people who work much more about bodies more than music. So, yeah. Was that enough for?
I think so. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? There's one more.
Gary.
Hi, yeah, it's Jerry McGoldrick. Thanks, Kiku. That was really a fascinating talk. Just all that stuff about, coming into Shakuhachi with these ideas of its connection to Zen and how they sort of get stripped away the more you look at it. So yeah, that was great to hear all that stuff. My master's and PhD were on Tsugaru shamisen, so I'm really familiar with the Tsugaru area. And, the research that I did up there, there was very few people that knew about, Kinpū-ryū Shakuhachi, but the first things I heard about it were that it was different from, Shakuhachi elsewhere, and that it was powerful. It had this sort of pulse to it. And just before even hearing it, I thought that there seems to be a strong connection with Tsugaru shamisen there. And I'd always thought with other things, not music, but like the embroidery in Tsugaru and the lacquerware, they're all sort of that same sort of powerful and like detailed and sort of Baroque compared to those arts elsewhere in Japan. So it's something I haven't had any time to really think about in depth, but those connections between Tsugaru shamisen, which is of course like a folk art and for people that don't know, started with beggars and that sort of thing, and this shakuhachi, which is really something like you said from the castle. So people I talked to there said there isn't a connection simply because of that social distance, right? But yeah, it seems to me there must be something there because again you see it in the other arts.
Yes, and they say themselves that despite the social distances, between Tsugaru shamisen and the Shakuhachi of Kinpū-ryū, that the sound and the spirit and things, they say that, and it's very easy to make that comparison. The strengths of Tsugaru shamisen, the way you hit, it's so strong, and also it's a thick neck, and the it's not so many people. It's something that I would like to also to explore a little bit more, is that the shakuhachi used for Kinpū-ryū are fatter and more thick-walled than elsewhere. What you see from the later Edo period, it will be, which is interesting too. And of course, it's got very much to do with the locality, because of the climate in Tsugaru. The bamboo will be thicker, grow slower, and thereby does it affect, what comes first. But I think everybody would think of that expressive connection between Tsugaru shamisen and Kinpū-ryū shakuhachi. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Randy, please.
Hi, Kiku. Very
Hi.
nice to hear you, and very interesting lecture. I'm wondering, just as you're talking about the differences in the morphology of the shakuhachi from the region, do you think that this style is more rooted? I mean, the differences in the breathing style are more rooted in regional identity, that these are markers of regional identity?
Do you mean markers like this, the sound? If I understand your question correctly, I would say that it strongly connects to to Hirosaki, but I don't know, and I don't think that people from Tsugaru-han are breathing differently. And of course you can say what people locally say is the samurai connection, which is much stronger than the rest of the country, although that the Fuke sect is said to only have allowed people of samurai rank to enter the whatever sect, however we should talk about the Fuke sect, but at least they weren't active in Tsugaru. They were active, and thereby also doing breathing exercises and these kind of things. I did go up and see some of the martial art that's still left in Hirosaki, very specific to that area. And yes, the expression is very powerful, and but I don't know if I can say it's different. Did that answer your question, or?
Partially. I'm just drawing parallels to other musical styles where people have a distinct technique or distinct approach to a technique that is part of the identity of their style, and they fight ruthlessly over it's done this way, this is a proper way, or that way you can't put your hand sideways, it has to be on top, etc., etc., etc. So that in terms of people doing it from a chest pulse, people doing a throat pulse, people doing a head pulse. So I'm wondering that, and obviously studying, as I studied martial arts for 40 years, using the hara is absolutely imperative. So of course it would go to the shakuhachi.
Yes, absolutely. I think so too. There are other regional styles, but I would say that Kinpū-ryū is very iconic in how easy it is to recognize it. In some other, one other style that we could compare with is, for example, the Ichoken. But people get really confused. If you play Ichoken as a Kinko player or whatever player, then you will mix it with your own style and it becomes a little bit harder to recognize. But because of this pulsation in the way of blowing, there's just no way, whichever style you might be trained in, you can always hear Kinpū-ryū. And I think that is what makes Kinpū-ryū stand out, and why this battle of komibuki becomes more fierce than in other styles. Because if I go down to Ichoken and I play a piece that I learned from my teacher, a piece that comes from Ichoken, they will say, yeah, you don't play like Ichoken person. They surely will say that, but it's not that everybody can hear it, kind of thing. So that's what makes it stand out, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for the question. I think there was one more person who had hand up, wasn't it?
I don't see one at the moment, so I'll ask a question. Susan has another one, but I've got a quick one related to komibuki. Could you talk a little bit more about you say that word and the word battle almost together? Can you describe what are those? Are you relating those terms together? What is the battle you're talking about? People's way of doing that is a battle, or you're battling your body to do it?
No, I was more thinking in the sense of the fights over the right way of doing it as a battle. Yeah. But of course, there's also, I mean, kind of fun connotations to, the samurais and, because there's always been this talk about the powerfulness and all this kind of, so yeah, in a way, yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to my teaching. I teach a general music class, and I use shakuhachi examples to teach other things, but I don't really teach what they're doing in it. So I really appreciate the talk. So it informs me better, so I can explain this music in a way that I didn't realize I wasn't even explaining it. Not that I was explaining it wrong, but I know I can explain it better now. So I appreciate that.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Susan, please.
Oh, you're muted again. Still muted.
Mine is just a comment. So if there are other questions, please go ahead.
That seemed not to be, so just go ahead.
Okay. I was delighted to hear about this style from the Tsugaru region because I did my research on nomai for my dissertation, and that's a Yamabushi kagura. And I found Tsugaru region to be an important repository for distinct musical styles. And yours added another one. I was thinking of Tsugaru shamisen. But the nomai tradition, which is a masked dance drama, and it's really a synthesis of Yamabushi traditions with the local kagura, is also very distinct, I think, for the Tsugaru region. And I just wanted to comment that Tsugaru is very rich in terms of the types of distinct musical traditions they have there. And I'm sure there's lots more to study. There is, yeah, it is certainly the environment is certainly difficult. It's very cold, it snows a lot. So you can see the strength coming through, the strength to live there does come through the musical traditions, and that's what makes it so unique, I think.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Thank you. Thank you for that. Anybody else at the end here? I think we almost by the end of time. Well, maybe not.
Go ahead, James.
Oh, I just wanted to comment, really appreciate this broad viewpoint about the komibuki. I'm not a scholar, I'm just a bad shakuhachi player. So this was very helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm glad that there were shakuhachi players here too.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. I'm sorry I lost my ability to use Zoom and raise my hand, but I do want to say thank you so much, Kiku. It's great to hear you, and just to hear, you know, the Shakuhachi having a platform in ethnomusicology and in English language. Certainly, I'm at UC Davis. I'm a music composition PhD in theory, but also I study shakuhachi with Kakizaki Karu. And one thing that an interesting point you brought up is this idea of ownership and authenticity, and sort of who, you know, can vie for the right way, quote unquote, to be performing in a particular style or technique. And I think it brings an interesting questions to authenticity too. For me, Kakizaki Sensei being sort of my, I don't know, access point into the tradition, sort of any version of any technique that he trains me on is sort of what I just have to accept, or not that I have to, but sort of from an ethical standpoint, he is my window in. And so it's interesting when these things kind of maybe are in disagreement with certain other styles or versions. And I'm mostly just rambling, but I also wonder, have you thought about, there's a lot of comments and critiques on the sort of early music, like Baroque music, with like Richard Taruskin and others who have have you thought about kind of applying any of that to the different constructions of shakuhachi schools or ryus as through that lens, or do you think that's inappropriate?
I don't particularly think that it's inappropriate, but I do think it's very, very hard in a tradition where we do have notation, but it's only basically the skeleton melody that's written down, and so much is oral transmission, you know, auditory as well as, you know, talking. So I think it's very, very hard, and there are people attempting to do it. Yeah, I I think it's very hard. I admire people who have the courage to do it. I'll stick to what I can hear. But it is very, very interesting. And it's also very interesting, you know, how things change. And Shakuhachi world is so complex. So it's really hard to, you know, get an overview of it. Yeah. Thank you for your comment and question. And say hi to Kakizaki Sensei next time.
So we are at the end of the hour. Like we did with the last talk, everyone's welcome to stay and chat and catch up and suggest ideas for the next iteration of this. But if you've got to go, we will see you next time. But again, thank you so much, Kiku, for this. I learned a lot, and I'm very grateful for that. To you know, always challenge our preconceived notions of these things. I love looking back at your title, the capricious nature of this instrument, that so many of us, it's ubiquitous, but at the same time, I know for myself, I don't fully understand a lot about it. And so I love that you took this approach of kind of challenging what we often kind of take for granted of this instrument, especially those of us who are not performers or researchers of the area. So I greatly appreciate the time and effort you put into that, and we look forward to that article that you mentioned with British Forum and other things that you have coming up. So again, thank you very much for presenting today, and for everyone here. We are going to post this video as well as Yuka Eguchi's talk on Chado. I just kind of made an executive decision that I'm going to create a YouTube channel for the Japanese Performing Arts
Right.
group, where we can share these videos and maybe other things too, but especially these videos of these talks. So I will send that out over listservs. If you are not aware, we have a Japanese Performing Arts listserv of its own. You can find out how to sign up for that through the SCM website. Just look in groups and look for Japanese Performing Arts. And then we also share on the Society for Ethnomusicology listservs as well. If you're not a member of those, anyone is welcome to join those. You don't have to be a registered ethnomusicologist to be a member of those listservs at all. So we welcome you to see those things there. Other than that, thanks for coming today, and we will see you at the next one as soon as we figure out what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for having me, Justin and Jennifer.
Yeah.
That was a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Oh, here's Jennifer. Yes.
Yeah, I'm here. I apologize. I had a family situation, so running on very little sleep and anyways, you know what it's like when these things happen. But I did catch the tail end, and I just wanted to thank so much Kiku agreeing to do this and making such an effort to reschedule and keeping us.
Well, it was my fault.
No. It's wonderful, and thank you to Justin for running the show. And I'm so happy about the YouTube channel, because so many of our students, we've actually gotten a lot of interest from the students at Union College, and I hope you were able to get interest from your students as well. And of course, you know what students are like. They all want to know, am I going to be able to watch it at another time? So we want to make sure that we give them access to rewatch if they were able to join live, as well as watch if they weren't able to join today. So I appreciate everybody's generosity in allowing us to post these, Kiku. I really do.
No, of course, yeah. My pleasure. Really. Yeah.
Okay, well, no one, really no one has to stay in chat, but it's always good to see folks at the meetings, and this is a makeshift meeting from JPA, so it's great to chat with anybody. We did talk about some future talks in the series at the Orleans meeting, and I don't know if anyone's here from that meeting or not. I don't see anyone that was in New Orleans, but actually a lot of interest in less what we would think of as very traditional Japanese performing arts. There was a lot of interest in composers for various new genres of music, especially related to manga and other related things. And so I think that's quite exciting, though I have no idea who to approach about that. So that was one avenue that was of great interest in New Orleans.
We did also have another idea when we did the tea ceremony session, which was to continue our exploration of Zen related arts and perhaps get a garden design.
Yeah.
The garden tour and a garden design.
Good
Yeah,
idea.
I still love that idea.
I
think
do
that's
too.
a beautiful thing. And we can facilitate as many of these as we want. We had 112 people sign up today, and probably 30 people emailed me in the last week or so saying, oh my God, I forgot all about this thing. I scheduled something else over it. Please let me know when the next one is. So there's a lot of interest in these talks. So I think we keep going.
I think so too. I'm inclined, and we were happy to hear other people. I'm inclined to try and move forward with maybe the garden idea, and have our triptych of Zen arts, and give us a little bit more time to think about. I just had a student in class this week talking about gaming composers, Japanese game composers, and maybe following up with some of the resources that student was using, or even tasking a student with doing a little bit more research on, gee, how could we, what and how could we explore that in a session?
Could I ask Kiku a question?
Sure.
Change the subject.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Bill Mom gave me a hitoyogiri, which I'm absolutely fascinated with. I've had it for about 7 years, and it's taken me that long to actually figure out where all the notes are. It's really hard. It's so much harder than shakuhachi, or at least this one, really. I can't find very much about it. Do you know really good sources on it outside of, I know that there's some scores. I don't know how to read them. I've asked a couple people. They don't give me much information. I'm sort of at a loss.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because hitoyogiri, historically, there's much more resources and writings about hitoyogiri and also notation, as you also mentioned. But like in newer time, it kind of completely disappeared. So there's not much. I think in English language, Nick Belando might be the only one who's written kind of extensively about hitoyogiri. I think he also translated some old text about hitoyogiri. I know that in Nagoya University there are researchers doing research on hitoyogiri, but it's all Japanese language.
Yeah.
So I think Nick Belando is the best sources for hitoyogiri.
Okay, I'll check that out. Thank you very much. Yeah, I find it a very fascinating instrument because of the sensitivity of it. You can't get away with things very easily on it. So,
No, hitoyogiri is a very different animal. It's very interesting, yeah.
yeah, it's quite wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. So,
Any other comments or thoughts that people would like to share? Yeah, Avery?
Well, hello. This may be my first time meeting you, Jennifer. I believe I did attend the Way of the Tea ceremony Zoom last year, but I didn't really comment or say much. But I was actually Justin just stepped out, I think, but I was one of the people who attended the meeting in New Orleans, and there were a lot of younger people amongst us who are very interested in the anime and manga side of Japan. And so we had discussed for future presentations to possibly, because Justin mentioned 2 a year is probably the goal for this. If we could do maybe one really traditional presentation on like traditional performing arts and things like that. And then maybe one at the end of the year would be more about manga or something a little bit newer media related. So I just wanted to point that out. And I'm also, I'm a master's student in ethnomusicology from the University of North Texas. So I'm barely getting my feet dipped in the water of ethnomusicology and then meeting everyone. And I'm primarily interested in music and anime films and whatnot.
Very good idea. And, our organization has never, purported to focus only on traditional musics. I think this might just be that we got the ball rolling with Zen on the tea ceremony, and we have access to these wonderful guests. So if you'd like us to do something in anime or manga, Avery, if you have any suggestions on who to contact, that's often, these are our friends. So if you have friends, if you could pass names along, we're happy to try and make anything happen. Our definition of Japanese performing arts is super broad.
Of course, that would be great.
Yeah.
And I'm also really grateful to learn about these more traditional arts within Japan, because I got interested in Japan because of anime and manga. And I think a lot of people my age, younger generations, are getting interested in Japanese culture through that avenue as well. But we also want to learn a lot more about traditional arts in Japan. I think there was at the meeting, not a colleague of mine, but someone I happened to meet. Her name is Rose Bridges. She just graduated from UT Austin. and she had mentioned that she knew some people in the media realm, but I will probably contact her and ask her about that, and then send you and Justin an email. I don't have your email, Jennifer, but would you be willing to send it to me in the chat?
Yeah, I'll just drop it in the chat now.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I can try and follow up on that.
Perfect. And anybody else who has any ideas, please feel free to email us privately if you prefer not to share in the room, and we could work to follow up, of course.
I mean, I work with quite a few composers, and also, I mean, Hisaishi or somebody like that, who's been long time in the game.
Oh yeah.
But in anime and these kind of things as well. But yeah, sounds like a great idea. Okay, since it's evening over here, I will leave you now.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming and for listening and all this. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Wonderful, wonderful to see you virtually, and I hope to see you all again soon in person somewhere, sometime.
Hope so. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.